I discovered the affair when the other Omega tried to correct me in my own house. The castle of House Aloria stood at the edge of jagged cliffs, overlooking the stormy sea. Its walls were made of dark stone, carved with intricate symbols of long-forgotten magic. Mist swirled around the towers, and the wind carried whispers of secrets, some too old to remember. The sun rarely touched this place, and even when it did, it seemed pale, like a distant memory of warmth. Lady Selina Iloria, the youngest Omega of the house, walked quietly through the halls of her home. Her fingers brushed the cold stone walls, feeling the subtle vibrations of the castle's old magic. It was alive in ways that made her uneasy sometimes. Servants scurried past, but their faces were tense as though they sensed something she did not. The castle had always felt like a living thing, breathing and watching, but tonight it felt restless. Celine paused at the grand doorway of the main hall, her hazel eyes scanning the dim light. There were signs she could not ignore. A slipper left carelessly on the stairs, the faint smell of smoke near the library, and a faint impression in the dust as if someone had been there moments ago.
She frowned, her heart quickening.
Someone had been in her house without permission, yet no one had admitted it. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a messenger.
He bowed quickly, holding a sealed letter. "For Lady Selene," he said softly. She took the letter and broke the seal. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant and deliberate.
It read, "Some truths are hidden in plain sight. Watch the shadow that moves without sound."
The night will tell you what the day cannot. A chill ran down her spine. Celine crumpled the paper in her hand, her mind racing. What shadow?
And who had sent this warning? The castle had many visitors in recent days, but this handwriting belonged to no one she knew.
Later that evening, the castle's main hall was filled with guests. Lords and ladies from nearby houses had arrived, invited for a discussion about alliances and trade. Celine's family had long been known for their influence and power, and she, as the youngest Omega, carried a quiet but undeniable importance. She moved gracefully among the guests, her golden gown catching the faint candlelight, her mind still heavy with the note's warning. Then he arrived. Lord Cale Draven, a distant alpha of high rank, stepped into the hall. He was tall, commanding, and carried an aura of shadows as though darkness itself followed him. When he looked at Celine, she felt an inexplicable pull, a mix of fear and fascination. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and filled with secrets. Cale bowed to the gathered company, but his gaze lingered on Celine, and a subtle tension grew between them. Tried to ignore it, focusing on her duties as hostess, but the castle seemed to lean closer, listening to the unspoken words between them.
It was during dinner that the tension broke in a way she had not expected.
A figure stepped forward, bold and confident. The other Omega. Selene knew them by reputation. Clever, influential, and unafraid to speak truths that others avoided. But to confront her, in her own house, in front of her family and guests, it was audacious.
"You are mistaken," the other Omega said clearly, their voice like a bell in the hall.
The arrangement you propose will not hold. It is flawed in both power and intent. Celine froze, her fork midway to her mouth. The words were sharp, but it was the certainty behind them that cut deepest. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and something else she could not name. She wanted to answer, to defend herself, but the hall had gone silent, all eyes on her. Lord Cale, standing nearby, tilted his head slightly, intrigued. He had not expected to see this level of confrontation so openly. Yet even he seemed wary of the other Omega's presence, as though their power was a storm contained in a single human form.
Celine swallowed, forcing her voice steady.
"And what would you know of it?" she asked, though the tremor in her words betrayed her calm facade.
The other Omega smiled faintly, not cruelly, but with an unsettling awareness. "More than you might guess. Sometimes the truth is not in what is done, but in what is left unseen." With that, they bowed lightly to the gathering and withdrew. Bursts. Selini's stomach churned. Their words were more than a correction. They were a challenge, a warning, and a hint at something hidden. Something dangerous. That night, Selini could not sleep. She walked the halls of the castle, her thoughts a whirlwind. The shadows seemed to move differently, stretching longer and darker than before. She passed the library, and a faint glow caught her eye. A book had been left open on the table, a book she did not recall placing there. Burnt. It was an old tome, bound in black leather, with symbols that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight. She approached carefully, running her fingers over the pages. Words in a language she barely understood glowed faintly, almost alive. And then she saw it. A sketch of her house, every corridor, every room, and a series of lines marking places she had never explored. The last line ended with a small symbol she recognized, the mark of the other Omega. Her pulse raced. They had been inside her house. They had moved unseen, and their reach was far greater than she had imagined. Fear mixed with a strange curiosity. Who were they really? And why did they seem to know so much about her life, her family, and her home? The sound of footsteps made her spin around. There was no one there. Only the wind, sighing through the corridors, carrying with it the faintest scent of smoke and iron. Celine realized then that her house, her castle, was no longer simply her home. It was a stage, and she was caught in a play whose script had been written long before her birth. The next morning, Celine met with her family. They were concerned, but not yet aware of the full weight of the evening before. Her mother, Lady Vira, spoke gently, though her eyes were sharp. "Celine, do not let strangers unsettle you. Remember your place, your duties." Celine nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She remembered the note, the other Omega's words, and the strange book left in the library. Something was stirring, something that had been waiting for her to notice. As the day passed, the castle's atmosphere grew heavier. Servants whispered in corners, and even the walls seemed to murmur with secrets. Selene wandered the halls again, tracing the line of the previous night's book. She found small marks in the stone floors, faint scratches, almost invisible. Someone had moved through her home like a shadow, leaving no trace for ordinary eyes to see. And then she saw it, a figure in the high windows of the tower, just for a moment, watching her. Their eyes were hidden, but their presence was undeniable. Her heart pounded. Was it the other Omega? Or someone else entirely? That night, the wind howled through the castle as if echoing her thoughts. Celine stood at the balcony, looking at the stormy sea. Lightning illuminated the cliffs and the waves below, and she thought she saw the silhouette of a figure standing far below, unmoving. She could not tell if it was real or a trick of the storm.
Her fingers brushed the pendant she always wore, a gift from her late father, a symbol of protection and guidance.
She whispered softly. "What are you trying to show me?" The castle answered with silence, but the shadows moved closer, wrapping around the walls, the hallways, the very heart of her home. Celine knew that her life was changing. Something had entered her castle, something powerful and dangerous, and it had chosen this night to make its presence known. Desperation. And somewhere in the distance a bell tolled, slow and deliberate, marking the beginning of a story she could not yet understand. The night stretched long, and Celine stayed awake, listening. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind, every flicker of candlelight seemed to carry a message meant only for her. She was no longer simply Lady Celine Eloria, the Omega of her house. She was a player in a game of shadows, power, and secrets. And the other Omega had already made their first move. As dawn approached, the first light barely breaking through the heavy clouds, Celine made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth of the other Omega, of the note, and of the shadow that moved unseen through her home. She would not let fear control her. She would not be a pawn. But even as she made this promise, a part of her could not deny the strange pull she felt toward the other Omega.
The danger, the mystery, the magnetic force that promised both peril and awakening.
And in the quiet moments before morning, a shadow passed the corridor outside her room, lingering for just a heartbeat, as if watching her, waiting for her next move. Celine's eyes narrowed. The game had begun. The morning after the storm passed, the castle seemed quieter than usual, as if it were holding its breath. Lady Celine walked through the halls with a careful step, her fingers grazing the walls of the corridor. The previous night had left her restless. Shadows moved differently now, longer, darker, twisting round corners as though alive.
Her thoughts returned again to the note she had found, the cryptic warning about the shadow that moves without sound, and the other Omega. Their audacious correction during dinner had burned in her mind.
They were clever, confident, and impossibly dangerous. Yet, beneath her caution, a strange curiosity had taken root. Celine entered the library, the grand room with towering shelves that smelled of old parchment and candle wax. The book left open the night before still lay on the table. Its black leather cover seemed to shimmer faintly in the soft light, the symbols glowing like embers in the morning gloom. She approached carefully, her hand hovering over the pages. As she studied the symbols, the words began to make sense. Not fully, but partially. They were instructions, hidden maps of energy flowing through the castle, ways to sense its secret spaces. Some lines led to rooms she had never noticed before, secret chambers hidden in walls, floors, and behind paintings. She realized the other Omega knew these hidden paths intimately. A sudden noise made her jump. It was subtle, just a soft shuffle behind a shelf. She turned quickly, but the hallway was empty. Only the wind whispered through the cracks in the stone. Her heart pounded. The castle seemed alive, aware of her thoughts and fears. First, she could feel it in her chest, the hum of old magic waiting to be awakened. Celine decided she could not ignore what had begun. If the other Omega had moved through her house unseen, she needed to understand how and why. She began exploring, tracing the faint marks on the floor she had noticed the night before. Each mark led her deeper into corridors that seemed to twist in ways that defied the castle's architecture. Sometimes she felt herself stepping into shadows that felt colder than the air around them. Hours passed. Celine discovered a small room behind a tapestry in the west wing.
It was circular, empty except for a single pedestal in the center. Upon the pedestal rested a small crystal, glowing faintly.
The crystal pulsed with a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. As Celine approached, she felt warmth and power radiating from it. A strange invitation. When she touched the crystal, a vision came to her. Images of the castle she had never seen. Brr. The other Omega appeared in the visions, moving through the halls with ease, their presence both commanding and enigmatic. She saw shadows bend to their will, doors opening without touch, and secret spaces glowing with hidden magic. Oration. And then the vision shifted. A figure she trusted, perhaps a servant or a family member, appeared at a quiet meeting with the other Omega, speaking in hushed tones, exchanging items Celine could not see clearly. Her chest tightened. Oration.
Was the affair she had been warned about not about love at all, but about power, secrets, and magic? She did not yet understand.
Yet, as she looked into the crystal, she could feel a strange pull toward the other Omega, a mixture of fear and fascination. Footsteps echoed from behind, sudden and deliberate. Celine spun around. Lord Cale Draven stepped into the room.
He was calm, yet his gaze held the weight of someone who had seen more than he let on. "You've discovered much," he said softly.
"But there are things even you are not ready to face." Celine narrowed her eyes. "Who are they to you?" she demanded.
"And why are you here?"
Cale smiled faintly.
"I am neither your enemy nor your friend entirely."
"But you should know that what you are dealing with is older than both of us. Your house, your blood, the castle itself, all are bound by chains you cannot yet see." Her pulse quickened. "Chains?"
"What do you mean?"
He approached, lowering his voice. "Curses, old pacts, and bindings of power." The other Omega is not just a visitor. They are part of something that ties to your family. Their movements, their knowledge, it is connected to a web of magic and to the past you barely remember. Celine's mind spun. She had always felt the weight of her family's history, the unspoken power that ran through their veins. But this was different. This was not just heritage, it was a living force, something that could control or consume them all. Cale's eyes softened slightly. "You must choose carefully, Celine. You can fight, hide, or embrace it. Each path has a cost." Before she could answer, a sudden chill swept through the room. The crystal on the pedestal flared, and a whisper filled the air. Celine turned her head, heart racing. The whisper spoke her name softly, almost like a song, and she realized it was coming from the shadows themselves. The castle trembled lightly, as if reacting to her fear. Cale's expression darkened. "Do not linger here." The castle responds to intent. Curiosity can be dangerous. But Celine could not move. Something inside her wanted to understand, to confront the power, to face the mystery.
Cale sighed and stepped back, leaving her with the crystal and the whispering shadows. For the rest of the day, Celine explored further.
She discovered corridors hidden behind walls, secret staircases leading to towers that overlooked the cliffs, and rooms filled with strange magical artifacts. Each discovery deepened her understanding that her home was more than a house. It was a living labyrinth of power, secrecy, and danger. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the other Omega appeared. They emerged from the shadows of the hall, as if they had been there all along, watching. Their presence was calm, yet filled with authority.
"You have been busy," they said softly, almost teasingly.
"But you must be careful. There are forces here that do not forgive mistakes." Celine's heart pounded. Why are you here? Why are you in my house? The other Omega's eyes glimmered, revealing a depth she could not fathom.
I am here because your house called me, whether you realized it or not.
Aberration. There are threads we cannot see, and some of them are tied to you. Her breath caught. Threads. Aberration. What do you mean?
Fate, they said simply. And sometimes what is hidden is more dangerous than what is known.
The affair you suspect. It is not what you think. But it involves power, loyalty, and sacrifice. Aberration. And one wrong step could destroy everything you hold dear. Celine felt a mixture of fear, anger, and fascination. She wanted answers, yet part of her feared the truth. She realized then that her life had become a delicate balance of curiosity and caution, desire and restraint.
The other Omega stepped closer. You are stronger than you realize, Celine.
Brave.
The magic in your blood is rare, but untamed. You fear it, yet it waits for you to awaken.
If you deny it, you risk more than your heart. You risk your home, your family, and everything you love. Aberration. Whoa! He glances around in desperation.
Her chest tightened. And what about you? She whispered.
Why are you here, really? Their gaze held hers unflinching. Because I cannot stay away. Brace. And because the castle itself has chosen to reveal its secrets to you. But beware, the truth may not protect you from the danger that walks these halls. Aberration.
A sudden crash echoed from the far end of the corridor. Both Celine and the other Omega turned.
Aberration. A shadow moved across the hall, darker than the dim candlelight could cast. It was fleeting, almost invisible, but the presence of it was undeniable. Beret. Celine's pulse raced. The shadow, she whispered. Brr. The other Omega's lips curved into a small, grim smile.
It watches!
Aberration.
Always, but it reacts to fear.
Control your fear, and it obeys. That night, Celine lay in her chamber, unable to sleep.
Aberration. The castle was quiet, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed against her. She could feel the magic in her blood stirring, responding to the other Omega, to the castle, to the secret chains of power that bound her family. Aberration. And somewhere in the corridors a faint light flickered. The other Omega had left something behind. A small crystal, pulsating with energy, and a tiny note. Awaken or be consumed.
The choice is yours.
Aberration. Celine held the crystal in her hands, feeling its warmth and the strange resonance it had with her own heartbeat. She knew she was standing at the edge of something immense, something that could reshape her life, her home, and her understanding of power itself. Her thoughts drifted to the visions she had seen in the first crystal, the other Omega. Breath. The trusted figure meeting them in secret. The whispers in the walls. Aberration. It all connected, forming a web that she had only begun to understand. But one thing was clear. The castle, the magic, and the other Omega were calling her forward. And she could no longer hide from the shadows, from the past, or from the awakening within her own blood. As she drifted into a restless sleep, a faint shadow crossed her chamber door. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw the other Omega standing there, watching. Then, as if the castle itself had swallowed them, the shadow vanished. Celine awoke with the first light of dawn, determination in her eyes. The other Omega's presence lingered in her thoughts, and the castle hummed with anticipation. Whatever path lay ahead, she knew it would demand courage, wisdom, and a willingness to face truths that could reshape her very soul. And somewhere beyond the castle walls, hidden in the mist and cliffs, a new shadow stirred. Brr. It waited, silent and patient, knowing that the threads Celine had begun to pull would soon awaken forces far older and darker than even she could imagine. Celine's journey had only begun. The castle seemed almost alive that night. The wind rattled the high windows, carrying with it a chill that made the shadows in the halls stretch longer and darker than usual. Lady Celine walked carefully along the corridors, her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Darv. She had spent the day retracing the hidden paths the other Omega had shown her, feeling the castle respond to her presence, almost as if it recognized her awakening power. Her mind was restless. The visions from the crystal, the hidden chambers, the whispered warnings, all of it had begun to merge into a single truth. Her life, her house, and her blood were caught in a web far older and more dangerous than she had imagined, and at the center of that web stood the other Omega. Celine paused at the balcony overlooking the cliffs. Lightning flashed across the stormy sea, illuminating the jagged rocks below. The other Omega had not been seen since the previous evening, but she could feel their presence like a silent current in the air. She shivered, both with fear and anticipation. She did not know if what drew her to them was trust, fascination, or something more complicated, something dangerous. A sudden knock echoed from the balcony door. Inspiration. Celine turned sharply. The other Omega stepped inside, their cloak damp from the rain outside. Their eyes met hers, and in that instant the room seemed to hold its breath. "You should not have come out here alone," they said softly, their voice carrying a weight of warning and curiosity. "The castle senses your fear, your hesitation, and it feeds on it." Celine straightened, meeting their gaze. "I am no longer a child to be frightened by shadows," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. "I want to understand. I want to know the truth of this web you speak of." The other Omega's lips curved into a faint, almost sad smile. "The truth is dangerous, Celine. And sometimes knowing it changes everything."
They stepped closer and she felt the pull between them, magnetic and impossible to ignore. Every instinct in her body screamed caution, yet something deep inside urged her to trust them, to follow where they led.
"The affair," she said finally. "The one I was warned about. It involves someone I trust. Someone in my house. Tell me, is it real, or is it something else?" The other Omega's eyes softened for a brief moment. "It is neither simple nor what you imagine. It is about power, and about the chains that bind us all. But it is also about choices, and about courage."
You have more courage than you know, Celine. Perhaps more than even I expected.
Celine's heart pounded. The castle seemed to pulse with their words, as if it understood the weight of their conversation. She realized then that this was not just about secrets and magic. It was about her own awakening, her own power, and the difficult choices that lay ahead. Before she could respond, a sudden crash came from the main hall. Both of them spun toward the sound. Shadows flickered across the walls, moving unnaturally, and the air grew thick with tension. Celine felt her magic stir within her, responding instinctively to the danger. "Stay close," the other Omega said, their hand brushing hers for the briefest moment. The touch sent a jolt through her, both comforting and electrifying.
They ran together through the hallways, moving through doors that seemed to open for them, following the echoes of the disturbance. Celine's mind raced.
The castle was no longer merely a home. It was a living maze, testing her courage, challenging her understanding of the power that flowed through it. They reached a large chamber at the east wing, a room Celine had never entered before. Desperation. Candles flickered, though none had been lit. In the center, a figure stood shrouded in shadow, its form flickering and unstable, like smoke caught in a wind. Rust.
It is the shadow!
Celine whispered, recognizing the same presence that had haunted her since the first night.
It watches!
It waits. The other Omega nodded. It reacts to fear, but it is bound by the old curse.
It cannot harm you unless you allow it. Selene took a deep breath, focusing her mind.
Bert. She felt the magic in her blood rise, warm and bright, flowing like sunlight through her veins. The shadow stirred as she moved, its form twisting, coiling like a living thing. She reached out with her power, and for the first time she touched it, not with hands, but with intent. The shadow shivered and recoiled, responding to her command. Celine felt a surge of triumph and fear. She could control it, even if only slightly. The castle itself seemed to acknowledge her growing strength. The other Omega stepped closer, their eyes reflecting both admiration and something more tender.
You are learning faster than I anticipated, they said softly. But there is more you must understand.
The curse that haunts this house, it is tied to choices made long before your time. To break it, to truly awaken, you must face the truths that lie at its heart. Celine's mind spun. And if I fail, then the shadows will consume more than just the castle, the other Omega said quietly. They will consume everything you hold dear. For a moment, silence fell between them. Selena felt the pull of the other Omega again, the tension between fear and desire, caution and trust. She wanted to run, to hide, to deny the stirring in her heart. But she also wanted to follow, to learn, to confront the danger that had chosen her. The sound of movement broke the moment. From the shadows, a figure emerged, her trusted servant, the one she had seen in the vision with the other Omega. They stepped forward, hands empty but eyes wary, and bowed low. "My lady," the servant whispered, "the castle shifts tonight." It is. Restless. There are whispers in the walls, and the shadows grow bolder. The other Omega, they have come for you. Celine's heart ached. For me? Yes, the servant said.
But not in the way you think.
They are bound by fate to guide you, yet the path is treacherous. You must choose whether to trust them or to face the shadows alone. The other Omega reached out, taking Celine's hand fully this time. The warmth of their touch was undeniable, and for a moment fear and doubt melted away, replaced by something deeper, something unspoken. Trust is not given lightly, the other Omega said, but I see the courage in you. Together we may stand against the darkness. Alone you may fall. Celine nodded, her resolve hardening. She felt the pulse of magic in her veins, the strength of her lineage, and the connection that had been growing between her and the other Omega. She would not run. As they moved through the castle, the shadows grew thicker, coiling like serpents around the walls and floors. Whispers echoed in her mind, voices of those long gone, warnings and riddles intertwined. Yet she pressed on, guided by the other Omega, guided by the stirrings of her own courage. They reached the highest tower, a place Celine had never entered. The storm outside raged, lightning illuminating the cliffs and waves below. In the center of the tower stood an ancient mirror, its surface dark and rippling. Inspiration. The other Omega stopped. "This is the heart of the curse," they said.
Look into it and see what has been hidden. Only by facing the truth will you gain the power to change it.
Hooray. Selene stepped closer, her reflection warping in the glass. At first, she saw herself tired and uncertain, her hands trembling slightly. Inspiration. Then the reflection shifted. She saw visions of her ancestors, their mistakes, the bargains made in secrecy and fear. Inspiration. She saw the threads that had bound the other Omega to her family, the hidden pacts, the chains of power and betrayal. Her breath caught. The curse was more than magic. It was legacy, desire, fear, and ambition intertwined. It had shaped generations, and now it demanded reckoning from her. The other Omega's voice broke through her thoughts. Inspiration. Do you understand now? The affair, the shadow, the warnings. Inspiration. All are part of the same truth. Power and love, danger and desire, they are intertwined. Inspiration. And only by accepting them can you hope to change your fate. Selene nodded slowly. I understand, she whispered. Her eyes met the other Omegas. And I will not falter. A sudden crash of lightning illuminated the tower. The shadows writhed violently, as if sensing her resolve. Selene felt her heart race, her power surging. She was ready to confront the curse, to face the darkness that had haunted her house for generations. But just as she reached for the mirror, the shadows converged, forming a figure taller and more menacing than any she had seen before. It loomed, a mix of darkness and malice, its voice a whisper that seemed to come from inside her mind. "You dare awaken?" it hissed. Selene stood firm, feeling the other Omega beside her, their hand steady on hers. Inspiration. The castle trembled, the storm outside raging in harmony with the turmoil within. She had come too far to falter now. And as the shadow raised its arm, twisting and reaching toward her, Selene realized something important. This was no longer just about secrets, warnings, or the other Omega. It was about her birth, her courage, her awakening. And her choice. The other Omega's eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. Inspiration. Together, they said. We face this together. Selene inhaled deeply, feeling the surge of her power, the connection with the castle, and the undeniable bond forming between her and the other Omega. Inspiration. Together, she echoed. And in that instant, the shadow lunged. The storm outside had grown wilder. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the jagged cliffs around Castle Alaroya. Waves crashed violently against the rocks below, and the wind carried an almost alive murmur through the stone corridors. Inside the castle, the air thrummed with energy, thick and tangible as though the walls themselves were alive. Grand. Lady Selene stood in the highest tower, her hand still grasping the other Omegas. The shadow loomed before them, a twisting mass of darkness, ancient and hungry, its voice a whisper that clawed at her mind.
Inspiration. You dare awaken? It hissed again, the words echoing through the chamber like the roar of the sea. Selene's pulse raced, but she refused to step back.
Brave. She had trained herself, learned from the hidden paths, and felt the awakening of her own power surge through her veins. She was no longer the hesitant Omega she had been days ago. Inspiration. She was the heir of Aloria, a daughter of a line steeped in magic and mystery, and she would not let the shadow consume what she loved. The other Omega's hand tightened around hers. Brit. Remember, they said, their voice calm and commanding. The shadow feeds on fear. Do not let it control you. Focus! Your strength comes from what you choose, not what it demands. Selene inhaled deeply, feeling the pulse of the castle through her feet and fingertips. She could sense the hidden currents, the ley lines of magic that ran beneath the stone floors, through the walls, and into the towers. Bursts. She extended her mind, reaching out to touch the pulse of the castle, and the shadow recoiled slightly.
You are not alone, the other Omega whispered.
You have the castle, your magic, and me. Together we can bind it? Selene nodded, her heart pounding, and closed her eyes. Operation. She focused on her power, feeling it surge like sunlight breaking through clouds. The shadow twisted and hissed, but she did not flinch. She reached toward it, not with hands, but with will, and the dark form seemed to quiver under her gaze. A blinding flash of lightning lit the tower, and for a moment the shadow shrieked, writhing in fury. Selene opened her eyes and saw the outline of the other Omega beside her, their expression both fierce and protective. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged through fear, trust, and a shared determination to face the darkness.
You can do it, the other Omega said, their voice low but firm.
I will stand with you. Selene's lips pressed together in determination. We will end this, she whispered. The shadow lunged, moving faster than her eyes could follow. But Selene did not move backward. Instead, she reached deeper into her power, calling the energy of her bloodline, the magic that had slept for generations. It surged through her arms, her heart, and into her hands. She extended them toward the shadow, and a brilliant light exploded from her fingertips. The light wrapped around the shadow, forcing it back, unraveling the darkness like smoke in the wind. The other Omega joined, extending their own energy, intertwining with Selene's, the two of them creating a powerful force neither could have achieved alone. The shadow shrieked again, a sound that seemed to tear at the very walls. But it could not resist the unity of Selene's awakening power and the other Omega's guidance. Slowly, the darkness began to shrink, its edges dissolving, until finally, with a final surge of brilliance, it vanished entirely. The chamber fell silent. The wind outside quieted, and the storm began to fade. Selene lowered her hands, trembling, her body exhausted but her spirit alight with triumph. The other Omega stood beside her, eyes bright with pride and relief. You did it, they whispered. You have broken the curse. Selene's chest heaved as she looked around the chamber. The ancient mirror that had revealed the truths of her family now reflected only their own faces, calm and alive. The crystal she had touched days ago glowed faintly, a gentle heartbeat of power now tamed and safe. But there was more than victory in her eyes. She turned to the other Omega, feeling a warmth that went beyond gratitude, something deep and undeniable. We faced it together, she said softly. Yes, the other Omega replied, their voice low and intimate. And together we are stronger. You have awakened, Selene, not just to power, but to yourself. To what you can protect, to what you can choose. Selene's heart swelled, a mixture of relief, triumph, and a quiet joy she had not expected. She realized how much she had grown in the last days, how fear had become courage, uncertainty had become determination, and loneliness had become connection. The other Omega reached for her hand again, their fingers intertwining. Bert. The shadows may rise again, they said, but now you know that they are not invincible. And you are never alone. Celine nodded, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. The castle hummed softly around them, almost as if it approved of their bond, their courage, and the choices that had been made. The ancient curse that had haunted her house for generations was gone, dissolved by the combination of strength, love, and trust. As dawn broke over the cliffs, the first light of morning spilled into the tower, painting the stone walls gold and illuminating the rolling sea below. Celine stood on the balcony, the other Omega beside her, and felt a profound sense of renewal. The past had been faced, the dangers overcome, and the future was theirs to shape. And yet the other Omega did not leave her side. There is more to learn, they said softly. More to understand. But for now, this victory is ours. We have earned it. Selene smiled, feeling the weight of generations lifted from her shoulders. The storm clouds drifting away, and knew that she had grown stronger, not just in magic, but in heart. The bonds she had formed, the courage she had discovered, and the connection with the other Omega had changed her forever. In the quiet moments that followed, the castle seemed almost peaceful, resting after the long night of shadows and magic. Celine turned to the other Omega, their eyes meeting with unspoken understanding. The tension, the fear, the uncertainty, all had led them to this moment, a moment of clarity, strength, and trust. You were there for me, she said softly, even when the darkness was strongest? And you awakened, the other Omega replied, even when fear was loudest. For a long moment they stood together in silence, hands intertwined, hearts beating in quiet rhythm. The castle, their home, seemed to exhale the ancient power settling back into the stones, dormant but ready should it ever be needed again. Celine realized then that life would never be the same. She had faced shadows, uncovered secrets, and embraced her power. She had learned the truth about the other Omega, about the hidden currents of magic and loyalty, and about the strength that lay within herself. And most importantly, she had learned that courage, trust, and love could be just as powerful as any spell or ancient curse. The morning grew brighter, and with it, a sense of hope and possibility. The castle no longer felt like a place of fear and uncertainty, but as a home, a place of protection and strength, where Celine's power and wisdom could grow. And somewhere in the depths of the halls, the faint echo of the shadows lingered, not threatening, but a reminder of the trials overcome, of the courage tested, and of the bonds forged in darkness. The other Omega squeezed her hand gently. This is only the beginning, they said, a hint of a smile in their eyes. The world beyond these walls holds its own trials, but we will face them together. Selene smiled, feeling a warmth she had never felt before. The castle, the magic, the bond, and the love that had grown in the darkness, everything had led to this moment. And now, she was ready for whatever came next. As the sun rose fully over the cliffs, casting golden light on the towers and sea, Selene and the other Omega stood side by side, ready to step forward into a future of their own making, one shaped by courage, trust, and the quiet, powerful love that had blossomed amidst shadows. For the first time in her life, Selene felt fully alive, fully awakened, and fully free. And though the story of the castle, the magic, and the shadows would continue, she knew that she would never face it alone again.